Can you hear me? How about now? Fantastic. It's really good to be here. And I think it was Rejoice who was asking a question about being a multi-potentialite. You can be everything. You can bake. Just keep evolving. Do everything that comes to you one at a time and just keep evolving. That's it. It's so good to be here. And one of the best things that will ever happen to you is removing yourself from the box of your head and putting yourself in a room like this and then exchanging ideas. I'm telling you, it does wonders. My name again is Olumide Obidiran, but you can call me Mo. Most of my friends do. So every one of us knows a little girl or boy somewhere in a home who was told, this one has a mouth. You probably should be a lawyer, right? And that's how many people end up in their professions. Something an aunt, an uncle, or your dad or your mom thought and said about you, and there it was. And so there was no mistake that I was ever going to study law. I think right from secondary school, even all my teachers said, you should be a lawyer, right? Because you have a mouth. And so ending up in the Faculty of Law was really by design. I loved it. But second or third year into my studies at the Obafemi Awolowo University of Ife, I began to get a little bit disillusioned, not because of my study of law. I loved studying law. I loved it. I still do. But I looked forward and trying to plan my career. I really didn't like what I saw in the industry. I didn't like what I saw in many of my seniors, even what I saw in many of my lecturers. I saw that many of my lecturers were kind of limited in their real world experience. They knew the books, they knew the laws, and they said all the right things. But with a little bit of exposure, you begin to see the cracks and you begin to see that, well, this is kind of not fitting something else that I learned from somewhere else. And I can see that you're nodding a lot because I think quite a number of us come to that. And my disillusionment grew because even outside of the teaching of faculty, I also didn't find a lot of comfort in the people who practiced. Everyone here has heard the term charge and bail before, right? It was the one thing I didn't want to be. And I told myself, what would be my future as a lawyer? I didn't want to be a charge and bail. I didn't want to be a lecturer who only saw the four walls of a classroom and didn't know much more about what was going on outside the walls of the school. But then there was also the potential to be a really big juggernaut at the bar or the bench. Maybe not. I think there are fewer places in the world where you are restricted as when you're on the bench. And being a free spirit that I am, I really just didn't think it was time for me. I didn't want to go for the bench, and I just wasn't interested. So what could I do? And I started talking to people. And I found out that the career trajectory of most lawyers in the time that I was in school was very narrow. You either did this or this or this, and that was it, and nobody else was really doing anything different. But I began to explore. And fortunately for me, about my fourth year, I went on this program at the University of San Diego, even though I had not graduated yet. But after evaluating my transcripts, it was determined that I could indeed join the program. I was the only one from Africa in my class that year. And I joined that program, and I met these fantastic lecturers. Judge Diane Wood was a sitting judge in the US, and Christopher Blakesley. These are people I met, and they were not just lecturers in my class. They were real-world experts. Professor Chris Blakesley, for example, had been in certain real-life negotiations for the United States of America, and he had a lot of stories. And because of the experiences that they had, their teaching methods were very different. My head opened up and I felt like, where have I been all my life? Why did I not meet people like this in my faculty? And I made up my mind to do certain things and do them differently. When I got back, of course, I sat for my final exams, and then I decided I'm going to do everything that comes to my mind. And I decided that I was going to break every box that I had put myself into, that society helped me to put myself into. And I made this acronym for myself, BAKE. You can be all, just keep evolving. My dad used to say that you can peel an onion all the way to its very core if you don't just stop peeling. And so I kept peeling all the layers of myself. I was this, I was that, and I was very good at all of these things. And I decided I was going to be, whatever I was doing in time, I was going to be excellent at it. I grew a work ethic, unlike many of my colleagues and contemporaries, and I decided that I was going to live fully and die empty. First of all, you have to know and realize that we are all creatures of reinvention. Some people even say in the Christian Holy Book that we actually were reinvented God when he said, let us make man in our own image. And so we were created. A lot of people also in many other religions have stories of reincarnation, one form and taking another form in another lifetime. And so you begin to really think that we were not made to live in a box. We are creatures of reinvention, and it should come naturally to you to reinvent whatever does not suit the purpose of the time that you're in. And so from that time, I gave myself permission to not go the traditional route. I said to myself, business, yes. I went to LBS, I did a mini MBA course. I became a chartered arbitrator in 2005. I was the youngest that year. And everything just seemed like, yes, you can really have this other life that is not the traditional one. And so I pursued all of that. I also began to work in the nonprofit sector. Now, the other thought that you should keep in mind is that the more you are able to reinvent yourself, the better you will be positioned to reinvent things around you, because you really cannot give what you don't have. So give yourself permission to reinvent so that you can reinvent your world and your community around you. When I joined the nonprofit sector, I quickly determined that I'm here for change, and this is change. The language around the nonprofit sector back then usually was, government is doing nothing. But you see, it was not the entire picture. Because most people saw change and development from one trajectory, it was easy to say government isn't doing anything. When I joined the nonprofit sector, I quickly found out that the nonprofit sector was a great catalyst, but it was not the panacea for change. We were very often handicapped. And don't be surprised to also find out that a lot of the voices that you hear in the nonprofit sector, that is in civil society, they are just dancers. They are dancing to a tune. The donor is the paid piper. And he is the one who often creates the tone of whatever you hear. And so I found that in the freedom of being a catalyst for change in the nonprofit sector, you had to marry that with the right partners within the for-profit sector. Because sometimes people see the for-profit sector as bloody capitalists. They're just there to make money. And so the capitalism system is demonized. It should not be. It is the partnership between the for-profit and non-profit sector that creates a lot of the change that we expect, that we have seen, and that we will ever see. It will not happen otherwise. None of us is greater than all of us. If you find out that you have a problem, and that problem is sitting in, let's say, a grassroots rural community somewhere, how do you think change will be brought about? By castigating government all the time? Or by bringing government to the table, getting the capitalists to the table, having them fund and bankroll whatever it is that needed to be done? Is that not it? Is that under partnership? So castigating one side of the table rarely ever works. And that's what I discovered in that phase of my career. I said to myself when I was leaving IFE, because I had written my project in space law, and I saw space, even back then, as a business. A lot of people did not agree with me. I couldn't even find a lecturer who would supervise me, save for then Dr., now Professor Ademola Popola, who was my supervisor when I wrote back in 2003 on the laws governing outer space. It was out of this world, and everybody thought I was crazy. But you see, I think the people here understand a little bit of delusion now. Yes, I was a little bit delusional to think that someday Nigeria would look upon the space as a business and say, this is not rocket science after all. Just 3 years ago, the Arizona State University invited me to do a talk on space as a business. And I finally said to the whole world, it's not rocket science. It is only because of these kinds of delusion that you will find people like Elon Musk, who went up against established industries. Before Elon Musk, we thought that only governments and giants like the United States with their NASA could play in the space area. But you see, that idea has since been disproven. It is now very well known that not only is Elon Musk one man, not only has he been able to create the kind of capitalist endeavor to give NASA a run for their money. He has been able to do things with his company that even some governments have not been able to do. And so, why would we ever keep anything in a box after that? He's operating well. And you are custodian of some ideas today that you're thinking, maybe only government can do that. Maybe not. Maybe you can do things that you once thought that only an organization like the United Nations can do. Maybe, just maybe you can. And maybe you will after today. And so I say to myself, we're all cake. Why are we cake? Every time you bake, for those who bake here, and for those who don't, let me explain a little bit to you that all the ingredients that you use to make your cake, let's say 2 cups of flour, maybe you use 10 eggs, all of them are in categories of their own. They're like ingredients, like you and I are. You are an ingredient for change. I am an ingredient for change. You are an ingredient for change. And when we pour ourselves in a bowl and then mix ourselves together to make the kind of change that we desire, we make something sweet. That sweetness makes us indivisible. Once you bake that cake with maybe a cup of sugar, all the 10 eggs, and then you take a slice of that cake, can the rest of the cake say, I am sugar and I want all my sugar back? Is it possible? That one slice of that cake, does it have everything or it's just sugar? It has everything. So everything is in everything. And this is how I think about collaboration. Recently, a few years ago, we were invited to propose solutions to national occupational standards problem in many of Nigerian sectors. If you look around you, professions like tailoring, automotive control engineering, that we call mechanics, and the likes that have low barrier of entry are very much unregulated, but have a lot of people who practice in those spaces. You will find out that there's really nothing holding them to a particular standard. To say, oh, when you fix tires, you start with this, you do this next, and you end with this, and then you must make sure that certain things are done. Or when somebody makes this garment, what is to say, and who is to say what? That this must be hemmed in a particular way, and this must be joined in a particular way. How many people here have seen pictures online of what I ordered versus what I got? That is the result of no standards, because there is really nobody to say this is how this is done, especially for those industries where you have very low barrier of entry. And that is why we started operating what we know as Sector Skills Council. It's not our invention. They're very popular in places like India, the UK, the US, and all over the world. And when we started, our pilot Sector Skills Council in Nigeria was the Textile, Apparel, and Garments Sector Skills Council, which brought the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Labor, practitioners in the field, and the academics, brought them into one council so that industry can determine what is taught in class, and then what is taught in class can be endorsed by government, and then industry is able to pick up at a faster rate. There is not enough time in a TEDx talk like this to delve deep into these issues. But the one thing that I want you to take away today is that one main ingredient for a reinvention mindset is that you cannot do anything on your own. You need everybody, and everybody needs you just as much. We're all cake, and we need one another. Remember, none of us is bigger, greater, or better than all of us put together. Thank you.